Perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. Let's try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. It has been too long. Have you guys missed me as much as I've missed you? Well, I want to give one more round of applause for that opening act. What was that? Matt, what's his name, and Steve Hanselface? Oh, they were like, mwah. They were so good, right? We need a platform for the lesser-known speakers to have an opportunity to build an audience, right? So in all seriousness, I am very, very grateful to work for Mark Razinovich. I'm actually on his incubations team that built Dapr, which I'll be talking to you about here all day. And then I've had Scott as a personal friend for a long time. So we owe him a huge thank you because it was his idea that decided to get us here and just geek out with our friends. And that's exactly how he described it to me. Hey, Donovan, you want to come to Ignite Live and geek out with your friends? I was like, sign me up. I cannot wait to go do that stuff. So I am also sorry that I am wearing a black shirt. They did warn me. They said, Donovan, there's going to be a black background. Like, don't wear a black shirt. And I just laughed. Once I stopped laughing, it's like, I'm going to wear a black shirt. But for 1 second, I thought maybe I should wear a different color. Maybe red. But then I thought, I think someone wears a red shirt, but I just couldn't remember who the person was. So I still stuck with black. So yeah, I've just ended my career, by the way. I made fun of Scott Hanselman, Scott Guthrie, I can't remember his name, and also Mark Razinovich. So this will be my last session, so take lots of pictures, because I'm sure I'm going to lose my job after this one. So what we're going to talk about, though, enough talking. What I hope happens today is that you learn something that you did not know before you got into the room. So I am going to geek out with you like I normally geek out with my friends. If there's something cool, I'm going to say, this is really cool. Did you know that you could do this, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to start in a GitHub repository, because my entire demo is going to be run out of one of these things. But what I want to ask you is did you know that if you're inside of a GitHub repository, which is a fantastic tool to navigate code, that you don't have to click the links to see the files? Did you know that anyone can go in and press period on their keyboard and turn every Git repository into an editor view? Now you can navigate the files like you would inside of VS Code. You can make code changes. You can create branches. You can push changes. Anything short and quick that you need to do, you do not have to clone the repository to make those changes. You don't have to click the link and then click on edit and then make the change and then click on submit. It's just like you're working inside of an IDE. Now, what I really, really love about this is that it's like the baby brother of something called code spaces, which I think is a game changer. It is one of my favorite features that has ever been produced by GitHub. It allows me to have a bespoke dev environment for every repository that I have inside of my tool. And the way that you do that is you create something called a dev container. A dev container is just a collection of files that define the tools needed for that particular environment. You don't have to actually create one of these because there's a universal image that is available through all your Git repositories, even if you haven't done this, that will automatically fire up and has Python and Go and all the languages you want to program in and probably will work. But I needed special things. I'm doing a talk on Dapr, which means I needed the Dapr CLI. Dapr works on AWS as well as Azure and GCP, so I had to install those CLIs as well. And that wasn't on the base image. So all I did is I came in and I created a Docker file. In that Docker file, I'm able to then define all the things I need for my environment, and every time I spin it up, it's perfect. As a person who does demos for a living, it's awesome to be able to go in, click on a button, have that perfect environment, and then throw it away. It's much easier than it used to be with the VMs because then you have to have a big hard drive next to you that had these big, ginormous VMs on it that were really slow. Now I can spin it up in an instant and have it at my fingertips. It's a little bit better than just having a container, though, because inside of this file, I can not only tell it what base image I want to use. This can be completely custom or one that we provide for you. I can also tell it what extensions I want installed inside of my environment. So when Visual Studio Code fires up, all these extensions automatically get installed for me. So I don't have to remember which ones I need or figure out which ones give the best experience. It just automatically fires up, and it's perfect every single time. If you have sync settings enabled, all your settings, once you log in, will be synced to this instance as well. So if I go back here, the way that I can get to this is simply come to code and click on a code space that already exists, or say create another one. I have one running, so if I go ahead and click on this, right here in this browser, I am able to now have a complete dev machine. Code Spaces turns any web browser into a fully fledged dev machine. I was sitting at jury duty, forgot to bring my laptop, but I had my phone. It's like, can I really code on my phone? Claim is, any web browser, dev machine. So there I go, in a web browser, on my phone, go to Code Spaces, fire up, and I actually make changes to my Docker image while I'm waiting on my jury duty summons. So it's incredible that you can do this anywhere with any device, any language, anytime that you want. And the entire demo I'm going to do today will be out of one of these environments themselves. Now, this is running inside of a browser, but it is full-blown Visual Studio Code. I prefer not to work in a browser. Reason why is I love using the keyboard instead of the mouse. Some of my keyboard shortcuts, like Control F4, what does it do? Closes a tab. Well, if you're in Visual Studio Code, it closes the tab that you were working on. But if you're in a browser, it closes the tab that had Visual Studio Code running in it, and it's a really big pain in the butt. So what I do instead is I simply come down here, and I say, open in VS Code. And I've already done that, and this is that exact same environment now running on my machine. But I didn't have to install Python, Dapr, Kata, anything. All that stuff is actually installed for me automatically. So what am I here to talk to you about, though, is Dapr. Dapr is this level of abstraction that allows developers to write code once and run it anywhere. Yeah, you've heard that before. You're all giggling like, nah, that doesn't work, right? We tried that with Java, and it was like write once, crash everywhere, but that's a different story, right? But this actually works, and I mean, I didn't believe it either. So when I joined Mark's incubations team, this hadn't been released yet, and they said that to me. I'm like, oh, I've already seen this movie. Like, what you're trying to do doesn't work. Like, you can't write it once and expect it to work against every back-end service that you have. Like, no, Donovan, we figured it out. I was like, well, you are an incubations team, and you do work for Mark, so maybe they did figure it out. Then I started playing with it, and I was like, holy crap, they figured this out. This stuff actually works. And it works the same way no matter where you run it. And I said, where can I run it? And they said, anywhere. I'm like, okay, like, you guys really like promise big stuff. Like, really run it anywhere? Like, run it anywhere. And what they meant by that was anywhere. So I've seen it running on Raspberry Pis. I've seen it running on laptops. I've seen it running in Azure. I've seen it running in GCP. I've seen it running in AWS. I've seen it running in space. You think I'm joking, but I'm not. On the International Space Station at this very moment is Dapr running. So you write with Dapr, you can run your code actually anywhere. What's also really cool about Dapr is that it's completely open source. So if there's something missing, for example, one of the bindings, one of the pub subs, state stores, or secret managers that you want that's not there, you can add your own. When I joined the team, I added the one for the MySQL state store. So if you want to use MySQL as a state store, I wrote that component. It is now part of Dapr, and it ships with it. So basically what I'm saying is, on the International Space Station right now is a little bit of Donovan Brown running around their computers. So essentially, I'm an astronaut. But you can also be an astronaut by simply committing to that open repository. It's an amazing community. They were very welcoming. They encourage you to go ahead and contribute. But it is kind of freaky when you look up at the moon and you realize that there's a spaceship out there that has code on it that you actually wrote, and that's helping them do amazing things. So I don't have the video for you, but you can search, just say Dapr space on YouTube, and you will find it. The repository is full of different demos for each of the different building blocks that is offered by Dapr. I show you how to run it locally on this machine itself, how to run it in Azure, how to run it in AWS, and what languages that it's actually using. You'll notice some of these aren't even languages. HTTP isn't really a programming language. But what's beautiful about Dapr is that you don't even need a language to use it. Anywhere that you can submit an HTTP or gRPC request, you can actually access the power in Dapr. And I'm going to show you that in one of the demos real quick. So the first demo we're going to go and look at is for state stores. This is any time that you have a key value pair that you want to store, and you want to be able to retrieve that information later. You can fire up Dapr, tell it what the backing store is, and don't worry about anything else. And you can say, store this for me, and it ends up wherever you told it to store it. Give it back to me, and it gives it back to you, regardless if it's on-prem, in Azure, AWS, or in space. It just gives it back to you. So all I'm going to do is come back to a terminal. I'm going to CD into a state store. By the way, this is a Linux VM, but you'll notice I am actually writing in PowerShell. Something you might not know, so you can take this home with you. PowerShell runs perfectly on Mac, Windows, and Linux. And it is without a doubt, there is no debate that PowerShell is better in every way than Bash. Every single way. It is freaking awesome. And if you do not believe me, we can step outside, bring your laptop, and we're going to settle this like geeks typing all fast next to each other and stuff. But it's freaking awesome, and I'm going to do some stuff with PowerShell here that might convince you that PowerShell is really, really cool. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to play around with our state store. The key to all of this are what we call components. So if I come in here and I open up this components folder, you'll notice that I have components for local, which is the local Docker containers I might be running, and it clearly says that I have a state store called state store. That is the most important thing that I have highlighted right now. As long as that name stays the same, you can change everything else you want underneath it, and the code will continue to work. I know that there's a state store called state store. This one happens to be backed by Redis cache, which is just a Docker container running on my machine. If I go over here to Azure, and I look at its state store, it's actually backed by Cosmos DB. But the state store is the most important part, and the name has not changed. I wanted to make sure people understood it worked in AWS, so I created a DynamoDB over there and configured that as my state store, and all the code continued to work, and I didn't have to change a thing. So let's go ahead and start this thing up. In every one of these folders, and you can use this repository for yourself. So you can go and do demos for your friends if you want to convince them that it's awesome. Every one of the folders has a demo PowerShell file in it that will fire up the demo for you with those different configurations already applied for you. So I'm simply going to come into the state store folder, and I'm going to run demo. And when I do, what it did is it fired up Dapr with a specific command line saying, hey, Dapr, I need you to start. I need you to use those local configurations and make yourself available to me on port 3500. It says, all right, I'm up and running. Now what would you like to do? What I'd like to do is I'd like to store my dog's name as a key value pair. My dog happens to be named Hybrid. I pushed this command here, and now it gave me a 204. Because it's backed in Redis, I can come over here, refresh this viewer, and I can now see inside of Redis cache is my dog name Hybrid. If I want to, I can use a get command, which is just a URL here, and if I send this request, I get back the value inside of here, which is easy. And then I can see here that with a simple command, I can issue a delete. I send the delete, come back and refresh, and my dog is gone. Now I want to prove that I can do this anywhere without changing any of these commands. So I simply come down here, cancel this. I'm going to do env, which is an option that I can press here. And with env, I'm going to switch it to Azure. Now it's running inside of Azure, and I can prove that by if I come over to the Azure extension. Actually, I will do this from the browser. It's going to be quicker. Here I have a browser. I am going to be inside of my state store. Inside of here, I have a Cosmos DB. And I can do a data browser. And what we should see is that there's actually nothing in there at the moment, because I don't believe I've run this yet. So great, it's empty. If I come back and I run the exact same commands I was talking about before, which I come in and I set my dog, come back and I refresh my browser, what we should see now is that there actually is going to be a new item in there. That was refresh, was it not? There we go. So there's my dog Hybrid inside of Azure without me changing anything. I can go back and retrieve it just like I did before, and better yet, I can delete it, leaving my Cosmos DB the exact same way that I found it, completely empty. Last one, and I hope you would believe me by now, but a lot of people were skeptical that it actually did work in AWS, and they thought I just created that folder and thinking you would believe me. So I'm actually going to run it in AWS as well. So I'm going to cancel this, up, change this to AWS. All it's doing is pointing to a different folder. And that's exactly what you do with your code. Your code doesn't change, just the configuration does. And the rest of your code works exactly like it's supposed to. Now that it's running in AWS, I should be able to come back over to my web browser. I believe I have my AWS console up. Refresh this, it should be empty. And then I'm going to go ahead and issue the command to set my dog's name. And refresh here. Perfect. Come back, and I'm going to show that I can retrieve it. And delete it, go back, Cosmos DB, gone. Right. It works the exact same way for pub sub, secrets management, service-to-service invocation, observability, the whole 9 yards. So you don't have to worry about should I be using Kafka, or should I be using Redis, or should I be using Service Bus, or Event Grid, or SQS, or SNS. You feel like you need SOS. You need help figuring out which one you're supposed to use and where. But as a developer, I don't care. Pick the right one for the environment in which my code is running, and I'm going to be able to write the code in one way. I don't have to take a hard dependency on any SDKs. I don't have to take a hard dependency on keeping them up to date. I don't have to worry about if statements in my code on if I'm running locally, run it this way, but if I'm running in the cloud, run it this way, but if I'm running in AWS, yet run it a different way. None of that. I write one piece of code, and it works everywhere. So what I want to do really quickly is just show you an example of some of the other components you can look at. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the pub sub event. Control W, get this out of my way. We're going to go to the other demo here, which is PubSub. And just like before, I have these different components. In AWS, I'm using, obviously, SNS and SQS. In Azure, I can do two things. I can either use Event Hubs, or I can use Service Bus. Both brokers work the exact same way. Choose which one works best for you. In local, I still use Redis cache for my PubSub. And the way that I talk to it is I simply have these same sample queries. Everything that you do as a developer is towards localhost. Because what Dapr is just a sidecar, happily running next to your application. But as far as you're concerned, it's localhost. You never have to find it on the network. You don't have to figure out how to resolve its name. You just say, hey, localhost, go do this thing for me. The one thing that you need to know is the port. And here it's 3500. And when I run my Dapr command, I'm telling it, I'd like you to be on port 3500. So I kind of know ahead of time. But port 3500 might not always be available. And what you can do is you can let Dapr just assign itself a port. What it will do for your application is then inject an environment variable with the port that it has actually selected for itself. So it's always localhost, but then you can read from an environment variable what the actual port needs to be. So if you wanted to, you could build these URLs in your code, knowing that they'll be flexible and configurable as you move forward. Again, not having to change your code, but still getting the full flexibility. And I was all about just using the HTML URLs because I'm not a big fan of taking on hard dependencies. So I thought if I can just use the HTTP client inside of my language, I don't have to have any dependencies, I'll just use it that way instead, and life goes good. But there are things that the SDK brings to you that I'll show you here in just a minute that makes it a little bit easier, and I kind of softened up and finally started using it. But all you say is localhost 3500, I'd like to publish on a pub/sub1 component into the topic called new order. And this is the payload that I actually want to post into that thing, and the event goes off into the ether. It gets posted, and then all the subscribers get notified when that item comes down to them, which is really nice. Now, instead of me just doing this demo here, I want to show you how easy it is to get started and actually put these two things together, the state store and the pub sub, and turn a sample application into a stateful, event-driven microservice. Okay, so we're going to do that together here. So instead of me doing this demo, I'm going to show you in real time exactly how we do that. So let me go ahead and cancel this, and we're going to switch over into the My App workspace. And you can do that by using the folders down here. There's a little file here. My app is the one we want. Just say open. What it does is it whittles down the environment so that it only focuses on the folders that you care about for the demo that you're actually doing. Some of the demos are very specific about it. Some of them aren't. But what we're going to do now is we're going to go back in and write some really cool code here together. Because I think it's more impressive when you see exactly what it takes versus me giving you an app that's already been written. I want you to see exactly what it takes to get started. So I'm obviously going to be writing in .NET. I'm a big fan of .NET. I think it's awesome. I heard what Mark said about Rust. I'm sticking with .NET, right? It's just so much easier for me to deal with. And again, I'm going to do a little bit of comparison again. I need to make a directory. I'm going to have source, my app, and in there we're going to put our thing. But instead of me having to do several commands, I'm just going to do mcd tab enter. You see what happened there? Created two folders and jumped right inside that folder with one command. That's PowerShell, baby. No bash is doing that stuff for you. So all those people who say bash is awesome, not this awesome. Oh, did I go too deep? Watch this. I'm just going to say back up to, and bam, I'm right back at the top where I was a second ago. Oh, I need to jump to something called my app, JT, my, and then bam, I'm already back into the folder that I was into before. So if you're playing along and you're following and you're typing these commands and they're not working, you're yelling at your screen saying, Donovan's a liar, I actually wrote all these commands, but they are available to you. Just go install the Tracheon utils PowerShell module. You'll be able to do all the same stuff inside yours as well, but it makes life so much easier. So what do we want? We want to do .NET New. We've all seen this app before. This is the app that automatically generates random weather data. But in a real world, we wouldn't want to report random weather data. What I think we would want to do is have places all around the world publishing events that say, this is my location, this is the weather. And then anyone who wants to get that information would give me the location, then I would give them the last reported weather back. That's a simple system, and we can actually write that here in the time that we have left. So with that added, I'm also going to go back and write using the SDK. So I'm going to add a package here, and the package is the .NET ASP.NET Core for Dapr package. What this package is going to do is it's going to allow us to write in a much more natural way. Those URLs I showed you, they're still going to be used, but we're not going to have to write them. The SDK is going to take care of building all those URLs for us, knowing what environment variables to read, knowing how to do retries, knowing how to secure our communication. It's just going to make our code a lot easier to write because we're going to be able to use attributes and things like that, like we would normally expect to do inside of .NET. With that added, let me show you what changes we need to make to the files. So I haven't touched anything. This is just a plain vanilla app. But I'm going to come inside of this programs.cs, and I'm going to wire up a few things. Does everyone know what dependency injection is? Dependency injection is whenever you've seen a method called and there's some parameter on it, but you don't know how they created it, and it just magically shows up every time you need it, that's dependency injection. Someone registered all these services, and whenever you need one, you can just write a function that says, hey, I need this type. And that type magically shows up inside of your function. All the lifetime management is done for you. And Dapr provides that as well. All we have to do on this line is simply say, I want to add Dapr. By adding Dapr, we have now registered all the services available from Dapr so that they can be injected into our code whenever we need them. PubSub has a standard called Cloud Events. Cloud Events is an envelope that sits around the data that you actually care about. But I don't want to have to unwrap all of my code. I just want to get to the payload inside of it. So what I can do is add middleware here by saying I would like to use Cloud Events. Go there, if I can type correctly, app.use cloud events. There they are. So this is middleware that's going to go unwrap all the cloud events for me and give me the ability to simply use the internal payload, which is the model that I'm going to be moving around. Finally, I need a way to be able to subscribe to those PubSub events. I don't want to have to write code that says this is who I subscribe to and this is where you call me. I wish I could just use an attribute that says this is the thing that I care about, and every time something happens here, you call me when it's time to. To do that, I add one more line of code, which says I want to add app map subscriber handler. This just enabled attributes so that Dapr can read those attributes and say, oh, okay, every time something happens on that topic of that PubSub, I'll call you with the payload for you. And I'll unwrap it because we have the Cloud Events middleware already in place for us. So those 3 lines of code are all I need to add into program. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move over into the controllers folder. This is the default controller. It basically uses random values to go ahead and return data, which we don't. So we're going to go ahead and delete this. We don't need this anymore. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and modify the get. Instead of returning a list of random information, we're going to return specific information that you asked for. So let's change a few things here. So I'm going to need the location, right? So on the route, I'd like it to say /location, and then that location be passed to me as a parameter that I can use to then go query my state store. So I'm going to add a route here. So the route is going to call location. I want to use this as a string parameter that comes into my method. So I'm going to go string location. So I now know every time you call this, I'm going to get a location that I can use to go look something up. All the cool kids say you're supposed to async everything, so let's go ahead and make this async as well. And I'm not doing a list anymore. I'm just going to do an individual object, so that needs to be a task. So now I'm basically returning a task that has a weather forecast inside of it. I get rid of all of this code. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a Dapr client. So here, I'm going to use dependency injection, and I now have that Dapr client. From the services that are registered, go find me a Dapr client and give me an instance of that so that I can use it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, using the Dapr client, I would like to get state asynchronously. That state is going to be of type weather forecast. And it's asking me, what is the name of the component where you're actually getting the state from? Remember, I kept saying, as long as it says state store there, you're going to be good. So we're going to also use state store. So it's going to be state store. Yep. And then how we're going to get it from the location that was actually passed in. So I need to await this, and then we're going to be good to go. Everything's happy. So with one line of code, I'm able to ask Dapr, no matter where the state is stored, go get it for me based on this key, return it so that I can give it back to the caller. All that other code is gone, and this is actually functioning code that can be ready to work. Now what we need to do is how do I actually get the data from the PubSub and store it inside of the state store? What we're going to do here is we're going to do an API. We're going to do post async. I don't need any of this information here, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this. We obviously want to do a weather forecast. And just for this method, I'm going to return the model that I got. Now, the way that we're going to want to do this is we're going to want to be able to use the location. But if I were to go and look at this particular item, I'm going to press Alt on my keyboard and F12. What this is going to allow me to do is allow me to peek at the definition, but not have to open the file up. What's really cool when you peek at something is you can actually modify the code that you're peeking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a location property here, which doesn't exist already. So now I'm going to have the ability in my payload to store the location that I want to be able to use to retrieve and store this information. I just simply press escape, that file's been modified, and I can keep coding. What I want to do here is I'm going to use my Dapr client, which I need to go and get from my PubSub again, from my dependency injection. So now I have a Dapr client. And with this Dapr client, I'm going to say Dapr client, save state async of type weather forecast. And it asks me again, what's your state store called? It's called state store. How are you going to store this? What's the key? The key is actually going to be the location of the model, and the model is what I actually want to save. Pretty simple. So again, this one line of code will write to a state store the information that I get such that I can go back and retrieve it later by the location. The question is how do I know, or how does Dapr know when to call me? That's where I registered that attribute I was talking about earlier. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say I need an attribute. Dapr, there is a pub subcomponent called pub_sub, and as long as that name is the same, doesn't matter what the broker is, and there's going to be a topic on it called new. Every time someone posts a weather forecast to that new topic, make sure you call me with that payload, and this code will actually write that thing down to our store for us. So that's it. I've written 3 lines of code here, 3 lines of code in the other one, and I now have an event-based stateful web service that works thanks to Dapr. So let's see it actually work in action. Let me go make sure that my state store here is finished, is clean, because it's going to be inside of Redis. Perfect, it's nice and empty. And now I'm going to do a Dapr run command. So let me get this out of my way, and we're going to do Dapr run. So what I'm saying here is that, hey, Dapr, I want you to run my app, and I want you to call my app. This is important if you're doing service-of-service invocation, because all I have to know is the name of the app, and then Dapr will figure out how to communicate with it for me, which you're going to see in another demo here in just a second. From there, I simply say, what port do I want it to be on? I'm running on port 5000, so hey, Dapr, if you need to talk to me, tell me anything, give me pub_sub events, I'm on port 5000. I've asked Dapr to set itself up on port 3500. Of course, I can let this be randomly generated and have the data passed into me, but I want to go ahead and stick with 3500. And then I tell Dapr how to run my application. What I want you to do is do a .NET run, and the URLs are going to pass in to force it to be on port 5000. So if I go ahead and press enter here, what should happen is Dapr should build the application that we just coded together. It should fire up the Dapr sidecar, wire these 2 things together, and we should now be able to post new weather and get weather back from that particular system. The way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use an extension. There's a great extension, I've already been using it, that allows you to just simply send HTTP request to any application or URL that you want. And this is what I'm going to do here. I'm saying, hey, Dapr, I would like to publish to the pub subcomponent on the new topic this piece of weather data. When I go ahead and click on that, we see we got a 204, which is great, which means everything works the way that I wanted it to. And if I come here and I simply click on get, I get that exact same piece of data back that I pushed down in there. And that data is actually stored inside of Redis over here. New, that's the topic that's actually getting the pub_sub events. And this is the actual record. And for every location, they would have their own weather, and I could go back and get that information back. That's very simple. But no web service is quite this simple. And we always need to be able to debug those. And debugging is being able to set breakpoints, use watch windows, look at your call stack. And how do I do that when I have to have a side process spun up before I can actually use my application? Luckily, the Dapr team thought about that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and stop this, because I don't want to have to come down to the command line every single time I want to run my app. And then how do I attach my debugger after? What we can do instead, let me get these windows out of my way, is we're going to ask the .NET extension to please generate the assets that allow me to have an F5 experience with my current application. And if I come over here to debug, I can now see that I have these 2 new configurations that weren't there before. What I need to now do is Dapprize those, and I can ask Dapr, hey Dapr, can you use one of these as a template, and then Dapprize it such that Dapr fires up with it as well, so that I can actually have a really great F5 experience and set breakpoints and things like that. We're going to stick to the web. We call it my app. From my app, we're going to do port 5000. And now we're going to go back and look at what it generated for us. It's this one that has with Dapr. And if we open it up, we'll see exactly what it did. It created a duplicate of the original one and then added some additional information. This pre-launch task is where it's actually going to go off and launch the Dapr run command that you saw me do at the command line. It's just going to do it for us. And then after we're done, it's basically going to go off and shut Dapr down for us so that we have a really nice, clean experience. This is not a web app. It's a web service, so I don't need it to launch a browser, so I'll just get rid of that. I want to make sure it runs on port 5000, so I'm just going to put this here. So this makes sure that the environment variable is properly set so that my app runs on port 5000. And I don't need this either because it's, again, it's a web service, not a web app. Finally, what I want to do is go look at the tasks that were created for us, because I think once you understand how the launch task works and the task.json work, you start to see the power that you actually have when you're using Visual Studio Code. You can do this across languages, even if every microservice is written in a different language, have the same experience that I'm about to show you. So what we're going to do now is come over here, task.json. The build was generated for us. This is where we build our code. Publish is what we use when we're getting ready to publish it to a repository. And then watch is what we do when we want to look for changes. But this is the magic Dapr stuff. Remember I told you that I wanted to run Dapr on a specific port? I can actually pass that here by simply saying HTTP and then setting it to 3500 like I did before. Also, I know that gRPC is actually going to be done on port 50,001, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up for me too. gRPC 50,001. With that set up, the Dapr run command is going to be set up correctly. I can now hit F5 instead of going down in the command line, and I can do one other really cool thing now that I've done this. I can go into my actual code, and I can set breakpoints now. With these breakpoints, I can now hit F5 on my keyboard, and Dapr is going to go build my application for me. It's going to then launch Dapr, launch the Dapr sidecar attached to my actual application, and then wire up a debugger such that all these breakpoints can actually now be hit. So if I were to go back to my original file like I had before, come over to samples, click on send request, you'll now see that I actually hit my breakpoint. Now this breakpoint allows me to do cool things like I can take the model and I can add it to my watch window. I can interrogate this information here if I need to. I can verify that the values are what I want them to be, and then I can go ahead and continue running. I can come back, do a get, just like I did before, hit the other breakpoint. I can come over and add location to the watch window and do the same thing that you would expect. Just because it's a Daprized application doesn't mean you have some type of restrained the F5 experience. It's the same rich F5 experience that you would want regardless if you were using Dapr or not. So a lot of people will get confused on how am I supposed to debug this thing when I have to launch multiple processes at the exact same time. Well, this is how you do that. We've already thought about it, and we've wired everything up for you. The last thing I want to show you is how you can actually do this across languages. Dapr works the same way in every language. If you can send an HTTP or gRPC request, you can use Dapr. And now what I want to show you is an application that I've written. And they said, don't use any slides. So I didn't use any slides, but I did set my desktop to what I needed to show you. So this isn't technically a slide, but this is an architecture of the application that I'm actually going to be doing. This is a Twitter analysis. So what it'll do is it'll look for tweets with the word Microsoft, which are going to be very popular today. And it'll tell me, using sentiment analysis and AI, if that is a positive, neutral, or happy tweet. It takes 3 pieces to do that. One person is basically capturing all the tweets. They're using that with an input binding that I did not have to write. I simply say, here are my Twitter credentials. It says, I'm going to go get these tweets, and I'm going to start shoving all these tweets down into you that meet your criteria. I then take that tweet, and I make a service-to-service invocation to another process, and I say, hey, go grade this thing for me. It uses the cognitive services, tells me if it's happy or not, and sends back a new payload for me. I then publish that to PubSub, where it's then picked up by the viewer and displayed to the user. The trick is, one of these is written in Python, one of them is written in .NET, and one of them is written in Java. But for me to debug it, I need to fire them all up, all at the same time, and set breakpoints across the languages. And that's what I want to show you how to do real quick. So the last thing I want to show you is if we come over here, and let's get back to our starting point. So I'm going to open a folder. This folder is here. And then I'm going to jump into another workspace specifically for the demo that has multiple applications running at once. And I'll also be able to show you another cool part that you get for Dapr for free, which is observability. All the code that's running is actually generating telemetry that we did not have to add, that we can then go back in and analyze. That telemetry is currently stored in Zipkin, but I can move it anywhere else, and I'll move it into app service before we leave. So I'm going to come into DevOps and open up this particular workspace. It's going to refilter this, and then I'll show you the code that I've actually written. I've written this application multiple times, parts in .NET, parts in Python, parts and also in Java. And then I'm going to show you how I can debug all these across, which is really cool. So if you go to our source here, we have C# processor, provider, and viewer. We have a viewer in Java, and then we have a provider in Python. So what I'm going to do is Python provider, Java viewer, C# processor. And before I get too far, I want to make sure that this thing is empty, because if it's not, sometimes it causes problems. Cool, so let me go ahead and flush this thing, flush all. And this should now be empty. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that. And let's go talk about what we're going to try to do here. I created the exact same configurations I did before, but this time I have one called multi. Multi is the multiple languages all being fired up at once, allowing me to set breakpoints across all the languages and jump from one language to the next when I'm trying to debug. I actually helped a customer who was doing this. They had 3 microservices, so they had 3 instances of VS Code open, and they fired up the things in each one of the instances, and we've all done this before. If you have a C#, you're in Visual Studio. If you have Java, you're inside of either Eclipse or some other tool like that. You're in PyCharm for the Python thing, and then you're just popping between these IDEs trying to debug a problem, and it becomes very painful. What I wanted to do is show that you can do that all in one place. So let's go ahead and start setting some breakpoints and see if I can get this to work. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come into my Python provider, and I'm going to set a breakpoint on line 25. This is before I call into the C# code. Then I'm going to go into the C# code. This is the one that actually grades it using cognitive services, and I'm going to set a breakpoint right here on line 18. And then finally, I'm going to go inside of my viewer, which is written in Java, and I'm going to set a breakpoint right before we actually show this tweet to someone. We're going to do that right here. With that multi, what I should be able to do now is press F5 on my keyboard and have all of this information wired up together and be able to debug from one application to the next. So everyone, fingers crossed, because this is the riskiest demo that I do. And what it's trying to do right now is a lot. It's trying to build a Java application using Maven. It's trying to use pip install to resolve all of my dependencies inside of my Python app. It's then going to go build a .NET application. Next to all of those, it's then going to fire up 3 different sidecars, all configured to different components, so that it can then wire up 3 different debuggers for 3 different languages, all inside of the same IDE. And what should happen is we should start hitting breakpoints, which we've done. As you'll notice, I am inside of the Python code. It clearly says Python here. And if I wanted to, I can use the watch window just like I did before. Now, when I step over this line, what should happen is I should jump from Python into .NET and then be able to return here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this breakpoint, step over, fingers crossed, there we are. We are now in C# code inside of the exact same solution without having to jump between different IDEs, without having to worry about configuring different tools. So here I am inside of .NET. I'm going to go ahead and clear this. And when I go ahead and continue to run, I'm back inside of the Python code. Because all I did is stepped over a call over into C#. I am now back over here in Python. I can look at the payload that I got to see if any of those pieces of code have been messed up. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to post this to PubSub, which then should actually trigger code that's inside of my Java code. Right? So now think about that. No matter how complicated your system, no matter what languages people use, as long as they're all using Dapr, you can debug the entire system together as one solid unit. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this, go ahead and start running this application. And what I should be able to do is see this application running over here. So this is what the app does. It basically takes in these tweets. Again, you didn't see any code in there for me to be able to take in tweets. I simply said, I would like to take in tweets, and all those tweets just started raining down upon me. I then take those tweets, send them the sentiment analysis, get them graded, and then I show them to the user using 3 different microservices. Another thing that's really cool here is that I also have something called Zipkin running. So if I go ahead and open up this window, this telemetry is telemetry that I'm getting for free. I didn't have to write any code to be able to get this information collected for me. Dapr just collects it for you automatically and shows it to you whenever you need to see the code or see the information. I can easily come back to the dependencies and see this information as well. And you can see that it's showing me where all the information is moving from device to device. Zipkin's great, but if I'm running inside of Azure, wouldn't I want to use something like Application Insights, something that I'm already familiar with? And because Dapr allows you to write the code once and run it anywhere, I can switch where I send my telemetry as well. So I use this CI/CD pipeline, and I built this pipeline that actually deploys into Azure using infrastructure as code. The application's already running, so if I were to come in here, go to IP, and click on this, I should see the application running. This is the same application, not a single line of code changed, now running in AKS inside of Azure. The same thing that was running locally on my machine. But I also have Application Insights running. So what I can do here is come back over to my resource groups, find my Application Insights node, go over to my map, and actually see the application inside of Application Insights. I wrote 0 code to move from any of those languages, to move to any of my components, or even change where the telemetry is actually sent. And this is what I'm talking about when I say the power of Dapr. They got it right. You can actually write code once and run it on your Raspberry Pi or run it on the International Space Station. So this is what I wanted to show you. Dapr's freaking awesome. PowerShell's better than Bash. That's the end of my session. All right, you got any questions for me?
I do appreciate that on.
You just want to stand really close to me?
I appreciate your passion.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Can you heat me up, Paul? No, I can't.
All right, you are going to stand close to me then.
So we have a couple of questions from our friends here. What about securing Dapr configurations?
Oh, perfect. That's actually a great question.
It's a question from Gaurav on the hybrid chat.
That is a fantastic question. So let me show you what I can actually do here. If I were to go back in, and let's look at one of our configurations for our pub sub example. I will show you that. We can actually store the sensitive information inside of Key Vault, HashiCorp Vault, and tell our Dapr component that's where you go get the secret from. Because these components are actually stored inside of version control, and you definitely don't want to store those values inside of your file. So I'll jump back to another example here, and while that's loading, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about. That is a fantastic question. Another thing you'll notice is I did not enable HTTPS on my service. I don't need to because I'm basically behind front door or some type of load balancer that's going to give my TLS termination. And then all the communication between my microservices is through Dapr, which is already secured for me with MTLS anyway.
So lateral communication.
Exactly. It's all secured. It's all secured with MTLS, and it's also gRPC, which means it's lightning fast. Nice. So Dapr to Dapr communication is really, really quick. So if I go to pub sub, and I go to components, and I believe one of these is using... Let's see if this is the one I want to state store. Is it not?
This is what's so great is because live demos are live.
Exactly.
So you're actually watching him answer this question live from our audience online, which is super cool.
So for example, you'll notice here that I need a connection string. I don't want to put my connection string in plain because it might have a password in it. So what I've told this component is, for you to get that connection string, you have to go to this secret store called Strongbox. Strongbox, again, could be Key Vault, it could be HashiCorp Vault, it could be any secure store that you have, and the component will know when I fire up, I got to go get my secrets from over there, because this file will be committed to source control as you see it, which is completely safe and benign inside your source control.
So Dapr is really all about choice, too.
It is, because you can choose any backing service. There's 103 at last count of the components that are already in the gallery. And again, I submitted one. I know Mark Rozinovich submitted one. The components are completely extendable. 103. Yeah.
Only?
Well, now.
Okay.
To date. They're growing every day. And if you want something in there that's not in there, you just submit a pull request.
That's amazing, 103 components.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question, and the gentleman is asking here if can Dapr run in VMs versus in Kubernetes?
Perfect. Oh, that's a good question, too.
It's a container thing, but is it a container thing?
No, it's not, right? So I love that question because you can run it anywhere that you can fire up that sidecar. So it does not have to be a containerized app at all. We actually have, if you go back and watch DaprCon 1, we actually have an interview with a customer, I think it's Man Group, who is actually running Dapr on VMs. And you do not have to containerize your application. It does not have to be running inside of Kubernetes. You can run that Dapr sidecar anywhere and get all these benefits with a console application. And actually, there's a video of me on YouTube where I actually use a console application as a publisher of PubSub, and then I have a web service actually subscribing to that. So it doesn't matter where your app runs. If you have the sidecar available to you, hit localhost and all this power comes to you.
I love it. You can have a sidecar on a motorcycle or a van.
Exactly.
Totally okay. Question here from Jonathan in the chat. Is a state stored just like a database? Is it like a text
It can be. So a state store is just a name value, a key value pair. Right, so it could be a file on your hard drive, it could be Azure Storage, it could be S3 storage, Cosmos DB, DynamoDB. Anywhere where you could store and retrieve that key value pair can become a state store for you.
Interesting, okay. Question from Chris. Chris, you were moving pretty fast in PowerShell. What are those posh commands you were using? Was there a particular one that stood out? Yeah,
so if you go to the My App folder, there's a README file in here, and all you need to do is go grab.
All of this is available for us to look at on GitHub?
Absolutely, yeah. So my name is Dark Warrior, D-A-R-Q-U-E. So if you find mine, just go to My Dapr Demos. This is a public repo, and this is the actual component or module that I loaded inside of PowerShell. And I actually have a video, again, on YouTube of how I move through my command lines, because I've had people say, I watched your video, how in the world are you not using your mouse? So I created an entire video of all my keyboard shortcuts and how I actually move through the IDE without using my mouse.
What I like about you is that you can drive both stick shift and automatic.
A little bit.
It's important. Being able to do that is really, really important. All right, and then last question here from Zippy Online as we head out. Can it integrate into machine learning? Does Dapr have a machine learning component, or can machine learning be involved in some way?
So machine learning can be involved, but right now there's not a component built for it, but Mark is pushing towards that. He wants there to be a whole new brand of component that is called AI, so we can figure out how we can get AI and ML as a building block. But again, just because you Daprized your application doesn't mean you can't just go use any other library or API or SDK that you want to use, right? We're not locking you into just using Dapr. Dapr just makes the things that Dapr does really easy to do so that you're not wasting time.
Okay, so last question. I'm going to put you on the spot with 1 minute left. is there anything that you showed today that we can't do right now, that someone couldn't leave and immediately take it to their job and do it today?
No, everything I just did is ready, and it works. Yeah, yeah. And what's really cool about that multi in 30 seconds, that multi debugging, I had to use the technique that I was trying to demo to build the demo because it didn't work, right? Not because the Dapr didn't work, it's just my code was broken. I was like, why is this not working? Why is the Python not working well with the .NET? And what happened is that the JSON formatting was being changed between the services because I copied the code from. But then I used the multi-debugging to actually debug the demo so I could show you multi-debugging. Which is kind of
fantastic. Cool. Big hand for Donovan Brown.
Thanks, everyone.
Very cool. I want to encourage everyone, please, to fill out your evals as well. You're going to see QR codes all over the place. Make sure that you tell friends and tweet about these sessions. Let us know that we're here. Remember that there's also the IT Pro stuff next door. We're going to hang out here for about 15 minutes, then we're going to have Scott Hunter and friends join us. So please keep tweeting #MSIgnite. And thank you, Donovan.